Hello, and a warm welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle on Jump to It. As usual, I've Johnny Ward and Emma Nagle with me, and this week we're going to look back at the Irish Grand National, some of the other big talking points in racing, and we're going to look ahead to the English Grand National on Saturday, where we're going to each pick a 1, 2, 3. So hopefully we hit something close to the mark. Johnny, Emma, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vinny.
Thanks, Vincent.
Now, start off Irish Grand National. A crowd of 16,195 turned up. Supposed to be a record. We know it actually isn't a record. There's been higher crowds. But what did you make of it, Johnny? It was a good crowd, no doubt about it, and a great day's racing.
Yeah, it was a fantastic finish to the race. I was watching it below in Mallow. Emma and I spent the weekend, or some of it anyway, in Mallow. Instagram showing off racing on the weekend, but she was in Mallow and I was in Mallow, and there was a good bit of crack there. But we watched the race. Obviously, everyone was glued to the National, and like Paul Townend's horse, in fairness, he was the one horse that I would not have been backing in that race. I'd been following Ian Maximus this year, and I was pretty sure after his first run for Willie that he needed to go left-handed, and it was a remarkable finish to the race. The stuff, Vinny, about Bohemians brought out a tweet, Bohemians brought out a press release this year that first club to be vinyl only in terms of their audio at a match, and I was like, I think it was pointed out, well, surely a lot of clubs were vinyl only for a long, long time because vinyl was the only show in town. I think there's an element of that with the Irish National record crowd because I don't know what it was a record of, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I can't understand it either. I think it's a very odd statement to be making about it. Emma, what did you make of it?
Yeah, look, it looked a great crowd on telly anyway. Obviously, kind of looking back at the figures, it wasn't a record as was put out, but like the weather was fairly nasty there, but like there was just a lot of brave souls braving it. As Johnny was saying, we were in Mallow on Sunday, and God, it was some crowd there as well. I was saying I actually felt very old there. I think the average age in Mallow must have been about, I'd say it was under 20. There wasn't too many over 25s hanging around anyway, so it was kind of a good show of the return of the students from the student race days, you'd say. So yeah, it was a brilliant day. But yeah, Irish Grand National, what a race. Like we've seen Paul Townend pull off some miracles this season, but I think this was probably tops it all off for him. You'll be probably watching anything he rides now in Aintree because he could get anything up in the line, the kind of form he's in. So yeah, like you'd say, kind of going around second circuit, he could have nearly pulled him up, but yeah, it was some performance and yeah, great race. Yeah, brilliant weekend's racing overall.
You'd have mixed feelings if you were the previous owner of the horse, wouldn't you? Recently bought by JP McManus and goes and wins the Irish Grand National. But I suppose that's the way it is these days, isn't it? The other thing is we only had 6 finishers in the National, which is the lowest I can ever remember. There was prize money down to 10th place. So some people missed out on, there was 25 grand in prize money, 7.5 for 7th, 7.5 grand for 8th, 5 grand for 9th, 5 grand for 10th, and no one availed of it. There were a load of pullers up in the last half mile of the race. What do you make of that, Johnny? Is that a new thing now? If you're not in contention, pull up. Would you say the jockeys were possibly advised that by the stewards on the day?
Well, I'd certainly hope not. I mean, I was lucky enough to have the leg of a runner in the National, and it costs a lot of money to enter. Unfortunately, in recent years, really, it's become a race that has been more monopolised by the bidders. The AP and inspired purchase Ian Maximus. I don't think many people would have seen that coming, but it was harder for syndicates and the likes of our syndicate to have a horse in the National as the race goes on because it's $500,000 prize money, so it's 5 grand to run in the race, right? So that's a lot of money. So if you're getting, what are you saying, 10 grand for 10,
7.5 for
7.5 for 8. So like, I'm not sure of the individual sort of cases involved. You had some horses obviously who didn't, who were well out of contention and were pulled up. But it shouldn't. I think you were sort of alluding to it almost as an animal rights thing. At the end of your blog today, and that's fair enough. But I mean, it wasn't bottomless ground. What was it? Yielding to soft yielding to soft in the chase track. So I would imagine that jockeys went out there hoping to finish in the first 10 for prize money to get your money back. And if they didn't, they got this wrong because let's be honest, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, I agree. I find it difficult to understand. I'm not quite sure what the reasoning behind it is, but I do feel that maybe the jockeys somewhere were said, look, don't be beaten something to a pulp, as the case may be, to try and finish 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. If you're not in contention of winning the race, just, give it up. And that appears to be what happened. Like, even coming down to the last, the Devil's Coachman, which is one of the fancied horses. Again, it's a JP horse, so $7.5 isn't going to be worth much to him. Not like the rest of us. So that was pulled up approaching the last fence. So could he have jumped it? Possibly could have. I don't see any major reason, unless something had gone wrong with the horse, which it didn't appear to. I think he was just getting tired. But you'd have thought some of them could have carried on in their own time for the prize money. Certainly, if you were a small owner and it was, as you say, expensive to run in the first place, you'd like to have thought you could have picked up your money you'd invested in the race to get that back in prize money. But there you go. Emma, what did you think of that? Just, I know bookmakers as well would have been betting. Most of them were betting 6 places, but I'm sure 1 or 2 may have been betting 7 and 8 places. So it's a bit unfortunate that they're offering places and no horse even fills it.
Yeah, look, it was definitely very tough conditions there on Monday. Like, the rain was pelting down, and like, in fairness, I think you'd have to give the jockeys credit if they pulled up the horse and they felt they were too tired to finish. You can't don't think you can knock them too much for that. Like, personally, if I owned a horse running in that, and if it was a chance to take a risk and jump the last and get a few grand, I'd rather them pull up, to be honest, instead of taking that chance, if not any kind of contention, But yeah, look, I think the jockeys probably know best in that situation. I wouldn't be six finishers was surprising, but like, I thought they went a fair old gallop. We saw Paul Townend was struggling early on, and he came from a long way back. So yeah, look, I think it's fair enough that they were pulling up in the conditions that were there on the day.
In general,
Fair
Vinny,
enough.
as well, I would be of the mind that if the jockeys feel, I don't like jockeys asking horses to do stuff that they're not able for. If they thought this horse is too tired to jump this fence after 3.5 miles, that's absolutely fine. But obviously, as you mentioned, the National is a little bit unique in terms of the prize money involved.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, another thing to look at from Fairyhouse is the domination of Willie Mullins again. He'd 11 winners over the 3 days. He'd 5 winners on Sunday. He could, in theory, or it's only a matter of time, I would have thought, before on one of these big days, he trains every winner on the day. Punchestown, maybe when we see it, he normally has an unbelievable record at the Punchestown Festival. We keep talking about this domination. There's not a lot you can do about it, is there? But it seems to be never ending and getting stronger year by year. What do you think, Emma? Will he train all winners one of the days at Punchestown this year?
I know. I don't think it'll get to that stage, especially at a big meeting like that. Although I suppose Willie probably wouldn't have the kind of horses he could go through a card somewhere, but you wouldn't say it would happen at the Punchestown Festival. Surely not. Like, you'd have the likes of Gordon and Henry and all would have something to say about that, surely. But yeah, like, they're in some form, his horses. In fairness, I think he had 2 winners in Mallow as well on Sunday. There's another thing to mention as well. I think he gave Michael O'Sullivan some brilliant rides on Sunday, and God, did he take his opportunity. He's really coming to light, shining through. He's got a great ride in the National as well. But yeah, like, the domination of Willie can't be gouged too much. I think we probably mention it nearly every week because it's so evident after all the big meetings. But yeah, like, look, he has the best horses, and he produces them better than anyone else can. It's as simple as that, and you can't begrudge him too much for it, I suppose.
Yeah, you talk about Michael O'Sullivan there. Barry Connell's going to struggle to keep a hold of him, isn't he? As his retained jockey, because he's got so few runners, and like you see, he's not just riding winners for the likes of Willie, but he's also riding a lot of horses for Gordon at the moment as well, with Davy Russell likely to retire possibly again for a second time after the National. You could be dealing with even more rides there. Just interesting to see how that all pans out, because he's definitely a talent, and everyone's latching on to how much of a talent he really is. One other thing, Johnny, is Mighty Potter. Very, very good horse, and unfortunately he took a crash and fall and died at Fairyhouse. It's very hard for everyone involved, isn't it, when this happens? And he's not the only horse, I think, that died over the weekend in Fairyhouse. But what did you make of that? Gordon was interviewed shortly afterwards by Gary O'Brien on Racing TV, and a lot of people were critical of him on social media particularly, but I think there's always going to be an element of people giving out about these things, but it's very difficult to know what do you say in an instance like that.
Yeah, I really think we have to stop being governed at all by social media or what people are saying on social media, because it's an absolute cesspit. Like, I think it'll probably stop people getting into politics because of the abuse they're getting on it, and it's just an echo chamber of people who are often down on everything. I saw some horrific stuff on social media after the death of a man in direct provision recently that really threw me, because I'm trying to avoid Twitter at the moment. So reaction to stuff on Twitter in general, I wouldn't be that governed by. And I was told about the reaction to the interview in Mallow on Monday, and I was like, God, and it was like, oh, Gary O'Brien, he kept probing him on it, and I must listen back, and this is beaten on. Like, Gordon was clearly hurt about the loss of the horse, as you are. These are the best looked after animals pretty much in the world, and this was a proper good horse, and Gordon would have a love for this horse. But also, this is what happens in jumps racing from time to time. These accidents happen. If people want horses to be off and left off in the wild, they think they're going to not die in the wild and have accidents out there. He was enjoying his race, Mighty Potter. He was a very good horse. Gordon was definitely hurt about the loss of the horse, but you have to get on with it. And I did not see anything in this interview that even warranted comment, to be honest.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I felt the same personally on it. Then the other thing is that we've had some incidents in the UK again, with the Good Morning programme the other day, where we had anti-racing people on about the fact that going to possibly protest at the Aintree Grand National on Saturday. What did you make of that, Emma? We've got this whole campaign starting up within racing now, Stand Up for Racing, which is kind of trying to fill a void here that the authorities aren't really stepping in here. There was no representation from the BHA on that show. Now, in fairness to the BHA, they were not contacted about the show, so how could they know to be there? But at the same time, there seems to be a reservation from the authorities to really stand up and put forward the best case for racing to the general public. Are you of that opinion?
Yeah, I think the piece on Good Morning Britain was really disappointing. Just the fact, look, you can't deny anyone their opinions. The protesters are fair. They're fair. They're allowed to obviously put up their argument against racing, but I think it would only be fair to put someone on who could, put up a fair argument to counteract her points. I think the lady they had on, I had never heard of her. To be honest, I think she might have been the editor of the Daily Mail or something, but she obviously wasn't. She wasn't kind of a racing professional who maybe they should have gotten on. Like ITV have a great television crew who, I'm sure any one of them get the likes of, any amount of people who come on and counteract her points. I just thought it was a very one-sided argument, and I think the language she was using was very emotive, and what she was saying, while the facts might be, it's kind of hard to take what she's saying at face value, because there's a lot of things you could counteract her with, which she wasn't on the time of the show, which was disappointing. The Stand Up for Racing, I think it was kind of derived after the interview. Kind of, there's something similar in Australia. I think that's probably where the idea came from, and I think I agree with what you were saying, that racing has to own its issues and own up to the bad as well as the good in racing. But I think that overall the industry is doing well by the animal, and that's the kind of point we need to get across. And I think Stand Up for Racing is good in that sense, in that it kind of gives a voice to counteract the activists who are protesting against the Grand National. But it's always kind of a hard time of the year for racing. These I can't remember the name of our organisation, but it's kind of a good time for publicity for them, I suppose, to protest the Grand National, one of the highest spectator events in the country. And yeah, it's hard for racing to get their point across when there's kind of biased arguments being presented on kind of national television stations, I think.
Yeah. Johnny, you'd be an advocate of this Stand Up for Racing, would you?
Yeah, as long as it's done well. But I do feel that, you might mention as well the vote in the college in Cork, in relation to racing as well, which I thought was quite pathetic, really, to be honest. I mean, I respect people who are involved in veganism and all that, and I expect people who are looking after the rights of animals. But we have mass extinction of species across the world for years now, and you're worried about horses somehow. Where do horses come into the narrative here? Because horses in racing are exceptionally well looked after, and I know we have issues in racing. We still have the issue of what happens to horses that finish their career. We have issues with the Homer Scott incident that was brought up, but I think we have to be conscious of the fact that we have an amazingly good sport here, and we have to also, I think, as much as it's a concern in Britain, I do think we need to be confident about the horse rather than riddled with insecurity about animal rights people.
Yeah, but I'd agree with that. I think there's a slight danger here with this, that the stand up for racing thing will end up being that you can only really publicize or promote the good points in racing. It has to be warts and all, I think, and like we've got to face up to that there are problems in racing. There are issues with it, always have been, always will be, whether that's people stopping horses, doping horses, all the different things that happen. The breeding side of it as well, where sometimes it's almost factory like in the way it goes ahead and its business and everything else. There are lots of issues, and I just like to think that we can still highlight those issues while still supporting racing, rather than getting to a stage where it's kind of a witch hunt against anyone who says anything bad about the industry, that you can't be a fan or supporter of the industry if you start saying something about some of the issues that are going on. But look, we'll wait and see where it goes from there. We'll move on to the racing this weekend, the big one, the English Grand National. Emma, what do you think? Have you looked at it?
I've looked at it, right. You looked through the runners. I was going through them last night, kind of runner by runner, and you can only make a case for at least half the field, if not more. It's kind of hard to rule too many of them out completely. I think the ground will be interesting. It's according to reports, it's raining away in Liverpool the whole time, so how soft it will be on the day. I think it's going to be soft today anyway, on Thursday, on the day we're recording this. If it keeps raining and it gets very soft, it could change the complexion of the race completely. Hopefully it'll cool off a bit. You'd like kind of to see good to soft ground would probably be ideal for most of the horses in the race and for the spectacle of it. Yeah, look, do you want me to give my selections now? Will I go through them?
Absolutely.
Hold off for a minute. Hold off for a minute, and we'll just have a look at the race itself. First thing is, I see there's only one English trained horse in the top 14 in the weights. There's only one English horse in the top 10 in the betting. That happens to be the favourite, Corrick Rambler. 27 Irish trained horses. That's a massive record, isn't it? Incredible to think that, and the vast majority of them have some sort of chance as well. I noticed as well, there's only 5 of them were bred in Great Britain, but that's been a trend for a long time. French and Irish bred horses, particularly on the chasing side of the National Hunt game, particularly. But Davy Russell as well, I see he's going to he's definitely going to have his last Grand National ride, you'd imagine, wouldn't he? He rides Galvin. Rachel Blackmore, the only girl riding in the race again, which is a little bit of a pity. I would have thought that she'd have been pulling a couple up along the way behind her now by this stage, because she's been around for quite a few years. Johnny, what do you make of it? Is it a race you've got a soft spot in the heart for, or is it a race you don't really like, or where do you see it?
I'm not that bothered about the Grand National, being honest. I've never actually backed the winner of it, and it's nothing to do with that. It's just the fact that I find high-class handicap chase is very tough. They've changed the race a lot. I think, in fairness to them, I think they've changed the race for the better. But I'm probably more of a flat fan, half-mile race. For me, it's essentially a race now dominated by the big yards as well. It is what it is. It's not necessarily my favorite race, but at the same time, it's a fantastic spectacle. I still think getting the once a year punters out is good, and I think Rachel Blackmore winning the race was fantastic for racing. I really do think that. As a
We've lost you there, Johnny, have we?
Chase now, but I could be back now. It's an amazing spectacle, Vinny, but it's not a race that maybe floats my boat as much as others.
Here's a little thought from my side. I've thought about this for a while. Grand National, I loved it since I'm a child. It's been one of the great ones. It's a kid sitting around with the family watching it when I was only, I'd say, in short pants, and we'd all have a little bet on it and everything else. Great fun, and you're cheering on your horse and all the rest, and when someone else's horse fell and all the excitement of it. But one thing I felt, they've modified the course considerably over the years, and we've got a much higher class of horse running in it as well. I've felt for the last few years, where the elbow is, stick in another fence there, or a hurdle, something, anything. It'd really add to the spectacle, wouldn't it? Because it's just such a long run in. You talk about your flat race, and it's a complete flat race from the last fence to the line, when you just like to see something else, I think. Even it doesn't have to be a big obstacle, but just something that just adds a little bit to it rather than that big long run in. That's what I've felt for the last few years anyway. All right, Emma, What's your 1, 2, 3?
My kind of number one selection, I don't know, am I being a bit sentimental? I'm going with Galvin for Davy Russell to do it. The big bow out, if he will go out, it's kind of, I don't think he's confirmed if it'll be his last ride, but you'd imagine if he won the Grand National, he'd go out happy enough with that. But look, I thought Galvin kind of ever since day one, when he kind of arrived on the chasing scene, Gordon was touting him as a Grand National horse. He kind of just ended up being kind of, I suppose, just off the very top level in Grade 1 chasing. Kind of, I don't think Gordon ever expected him to be a real Gold Cup horse, but he ended up kind of being touted as one for a long time. A little bit disappointing earlier this year, but he had a procedure done on his back, I'm pretty sure, which kind of, that was just before he ran at Cheltenham. Gordon thinks he'll probably improve an awful lot from that race. He was second to Delta Work that day. The ground would be a slight worry for me. I think he'd prefer a bit of spring ground. If it kept raining now, I think that would put a bit of a scupper on his chances. But on nice spring ground, Davy Russell on his back, I think Galvin, he's around 20 to 1. He's probably my number one pick. After that now, I think Longhouse Poet for Martin Brazel is another one. Look, he was sixth in it last year, and you kind of watching him the whole way around. He travelled like an absolute dream. And I saw Martin being interviewed earlier in the week, and he said he probably even travelled too well, that they're probably going to try and hold him up a bit more. He's probably a bit too exuberant that day, if anything. If he can put in a similar kind of run and kind of keep that last burst for the end of the race, you'd have to say he couldn't be too far away. Bit of a funny prep, I suppose, but he probably slipped under the radar a bit, winning in Down Royal on Gold Cup Day under JJ Slevin. Look, Martin Brazel can definitely produce one if he plans out a race, so I can't see him being too far away either. And one last one, kind of at a bigger price, but it's kind of along the same form lines as Longhouse Poet. It's for the Griffin team, Roy Madge. Look, he's runner for a smaller yard, and I think that's probably why he is the price he is. I think he's anything over 40 to 1 you can get him at. He was bought from France specifically to try and win the Grand National a couple of years ago. I think he had smart form in France over fences. He was second to Longhouse Port in Down Royal, not beaten a whole pile that day, and he gets a good swing in the weights from him. So I can't really understand the difference in price between the two. Look, I think he'll run a massive race. If nothing else, I can see him going into the place money. So yeah, those are probably my three bets. But I like Johnny. I have never backed the winner of the Grand National, so I'd say bet with caution on those ones.
Well, it's interesting when you hear mine. We'll let Johnny go first, but when you hear mine, you'll be interested to see how much they match yours. There you go, Johnny. What do you make of it?
Yeah, just to note, Emma said she felt old at the races on Sunday. So you can imagine now there's a big difference in my age and Emma's. So Emma not having back the winner of the National isn't actually that big of a deal. If you're 40 and you're gambling as long as I am, maybe it's probably a bit of a bigger deal. But right, here goes. Ain't That a Shame? Is off his Irish mark. Two of the big horses in the race are by Jeremy. Generally, I don't really like Jeremy horses at extreme staying trips, and I'm not sure he's going to get the trip, but the form of his running Gorn obviously is working out really well. The form of his run at Christmas is working out very well. He travelled great that day, and he's 10-5 for Henry. Travels well in the races. I'm going to go for second. This is kind of provisional on him behaving himself, Mr. Incredible. I still think he's probably not in a bad weight. He stayed on nicely at Cheltenham, and one of Willie's in the race, 10 stone 4, and completely then at the end, Noble Yates was on the base stats, probably a better horse than last year, so he'll be able to defy that weight and run well. Into fairness, it's a hell of a renewal. I'm not mad on the fact that Ireland is so dominant in the race. I mean, it's not the Irish National, this should be the English National, but it is what it is. And I mean, what you say, one in the first 14 in the betting, not trained in Ireland, that's incredible, Vinny.
Yeah, if you got a third place finisher for me, Johnny.
Yeah, my three were Mr. Incredible, Noble Yates to finish at second and third.
All right, Noble Yates as well. Right, yeah, I can see why you haven't tipped a winner before. You've picked one that's a doubtful stayer, another one that's a rogue. So there you go. Anyway, I'll give you my three. My likely winner, I think, is Longhouse Poet, which is one Emma has mentioned, and she's gone through the reasons why. I think Martin Brazel is a fantastic trainer. You only have to look at his record at the likes of Cheltenham this year. He only ran a couple of runners. He was pipped on the post twice, bang there every time. The Irish National, he fancied his horse Panda Boy in that, ran really well, was a big contender turning in, finished 5th in the end, so you collect each way. Longhouse Poet, they fancied this horse last year, and he was definitely too free. He ran fabulously. Coming to the second last, if you stop last year's race, there's only one winner. It's Longhouse Poet. He just didn't get home from there. He'd been too free, saw too much daylight, but he jumped like a buck. I think if JJ Slevin can hold him up, sit in behind the leaders, and everything goes according to plan, he has to be a major contender, certainly each way, and he's as big as about 16-1 at the minute, which is a great price, I think, considering that you'll probably get 8 places with some of the bookmakers. For second place, I'm going to go for one of the Jeremies, which is Corrick Rambler. Can't believe the weight this horse has. Only got 10 stone 5 on its back. It's after winning the last 2 Ultimas. Very, very good horse. The trip is obviously a question, but it's Lucinda Russell won the race with one for Arthur in 2017. I think Corrick Rambler is a worthy favourite in this. It may be English trained, and one of the few that is a contender, but it really is a strong contender. And then the other one I do like, which Emma mentioned as well, is Roy Mage. If you go through this horse has a squeak. There's no doubt about it. Like it's a small yard. Patrick Griffin, Felix de Giles riding the horse, but it's a stone better off with Longhouse Poet for 1.25 lengths in Down Royal the last day. That was over 3.25 miles as well. Stone better off. It has to be a contender somewhere, isn't it? So if you fancy Longhouse Poet, you have to have a saver on Roy Mage, I think. So there you go. That's my 3. Very similar to Emma's. Totally different to Johnny's, but then again, we shall see what happens. If you are having a bet in the race, do gamble responsibly. And if you've got any thoughts on what you think your 1, 2, 3 will be, put them in the comments box below the video. We'd love to see them and see what you think. And hopefully someone will pick the correct 1, 2, 3. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've not only got this video you're watching, but there's another one coming out on Friday, which will be a runner-by-runner guide with Ed Quigley and Stephen Harris. They're going to go through every single runner in the National, so hopefully you'll get some pointers from that as well. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you all again next week, hopefully for another interesting show. Thanks for joining me, guys. Bye for now.